I walked into my husband's company anniversary party, draped in the emerald silk gown he himself had chosen, and was thrown out like an unwanted intruder. No explanation, not even a glance. Everyone knew, except me. But if you think this is the story of a betrayed wife who broke down, you're mistaken. This is the journey of a woman deceived who became the very person her betrayer would one day have to bow down to. If you've ever felt overlooked, abandoned, or pushed out of your own life, stay, because this story is for you. Chapter 1, The Remnants of Trust. I arrived at my husband's grand company gala, draped in the emerald silk gown he himself had chosen for me just last week. "This color makes your eyes look so mysterious," he had said, and I believed him like a fool still clinging to the last trace of romance. As I stepped through the entrance hall, the security guard nodded at me, just as always. I was Robert Sterling's wife, co-founder of the company, the woman behind his success. For more than 2 decades, I belonged here, or at least I once thought I did. The ballroom glittered like a gilded dream. Crystal chandeliers cast their glow over the lively chatter of the financial elite, expensive champagne flowed, and congratulatory toasts rang out. I recognized the mayor, the bank director, media figures seated at the honor table. All had gathered to celebrate my husband, newest member of the Billionaires Club. A night that should have been ours to share. I smiled, slipping into the familiar crowd. The women I'd spoken with at hundreds of events, exchanging handshakes, air kisses, and hollow words of camaraderie. They all praised Robert, and I smiled, replying, "He has worked so hard." Of course, I didn't mention the nights I combed through contracts, clause by clause, so he could sign them on time. I didn't mention that it was I who suggested the strategy for last year's merger. No one wanted to hear that. They only wanted to hear about my wonderful Robert. I scanned the room, searching for his familiar presence, and then I began to notice strange things. Whenever I approached a group, the conversation abruptly shifted. Lively chatter cut short in unnatural silence. Their eyes flickered toward me, then darted away, sharing glances weighted with unease. A look of pity feigned politeness, yet betraying something they believed I didn't know. Near the chocolate fountain, I caught a whisper, "Poor thing. She still doesn't know." I turned, but they quickly disguised it with small talk about the weather. I forced a smile, feigning calm. But inside, a creeping chill was rising, like being slowly submerged in ice water. And then I saw him. Robert, surrounded by powerful men discussing overseas expansion. He looked impeccable. Silver hair smoothed neatly, backsuit tailored to perfection. That confident smile that had once made me tremble with love. I stepped toward him, resting my hand lightly on his arm, as I had done countless times before. "Robert," I said. He turned. For an instant, something flashed in his eyes. Not joy, not warmth, but irritation. "Oh, Margaret, you're here." His voice was hollow, like wind brushing against glass. No welcoming kiss, no arm slipping around my waist, no introduction to the partner beside him. I smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Of course I'm here. This is our big night." A few men around him coughed awkwardly, then made excuses to leave. The air thickened with an unspoken wrongness. And then he said, "I need to get back to the investors. These deals won't sign themselves." He walked away without a single backward glance. I stood there beneath the glow of chandeliers, surrounded by eyes that were both pitying and quietly satisfied, as though I were some forgotten side character in a film whose ending everyone already knew except me. And that was only the beginning. Wow, Chapter 2, The Fall Beneath the Chandeliers. I forced myself to walk as though nothing had happened. A faint smile, a sip of champagne, polite nods to familiar faces. But my hand was clenched so tightly it had turned white. To be ignored in front of hundreds, it wasn't just humiliation, it was collapse. I passed a cluster of women from the golf club where I had sponsored countless charity events for Robert's reputation. One of them leaned toward her husband and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "I truly feel sorry for her. Everyone knows. except her. I froze. My heart pounded as if it would rip through my chest. What did they know that I didn't? A cold premonition crawled along my spine. I turned and then I saw her. Vanessa, the young assistant, golden hair and soft waves, figure trim like a lingerie model. She wore a blazing red dress, the kind only a woman utterly certain she was the center of the universe would dare wear. And indeed, she walked straight toward me as though about to pronounce a verdict. Margaret, darling, she smiled a smile sharp as a blade devoid of warmth. I think there's been a little misunderstanding about tonight. This event is actually for strategic partners and those influential within the company. I met her gaze. I am a shareholder. I own 17% of this company. Oh, she tilted her head. Correction, did own, past tense. Robert meant to discuss it with you, but I suppose he was too busy. And it slipped. And then 2 security guards approached, the same men who had once bowed to me each time I entered the building. Now they flanked me as though escorting a disruptive intruder. Vanessa's voice rang out deliberately louder than necessary. Please escort the woman not on the guest list out of the venue. The woman not on the guest list. The entire room fell silent. Curious eyes. Phones discreetly raised to capture the moment. I glanced toward Robert only to see him turned away, laughing with an investor wine glass in hand as if nothing were happening, as if I had never existed. I don't remember exactly how I left. Only the stairs pity mingled with amusement seared into me. I descended the steps, night air slashing my face, and realized I was still holding a small box. The gift I had meant for Robert that evening, a platinum bracelet engraved with the coordinates of the place he had proposed to me 23 years ago. I had commissioned it specially. 3 months of preparation. I stood there under the hotel lights, the music still pulsing faintly from inside, yet I felt emptier than a moon swallowed by eclipse. A waitress stepped out for a smoke. She hesitated, glancing at me. Are you all right? I nodded, forcing a smile. I just need a breath of air. But in truth, I had lost everything, the husband I loved, my dignity, my social standing, and even myself. Or perhaps I had just found myself again, because in that very moment, in the deepest pit of humiliation, something stirred within me. Not anger, not pain, but a kind of resolve. Chapter 3. All that's left is me. And a decision. I sat in the car, engine off, not rushing to leave. Just sitting there in the sealed space, golden light shattered from the garage ceiling spilling across the windshield, and everything seemed to stop. I opened my purse, pulled out my phone. The screen lit up. A message from the hotel. Mrs. Sterling, you left your gift box on the steps. Shall we bring it out to you? I looked down at my empty hand. I had dropped the bracelet at the very spot where I was cast out of my old life. Keep it or throw it away. I don't need it anymore, I typed back. But my hand trembled. Because I knew I was beginning to end everything, I dialed David Chin, my financial advisor, for over a decade. Margaret, his voice was groggy. What's wrong? It's late. Monday, first thing. Liquidate all my shares in Sterling Enterprises. All of them. Urgent. I heard the sound of him jolting upright. Oh, wait, all of them. $17 million. Margaret, what happened? You don't need the reason. I just need it done. Also freeze every joint account. Credit cards, bank accounts, investments, everything that has Robert's name on it. Silence. For a moment I thought the line had dropped. But no, David was just stunned. Margaret, are you planning to divorce him? I lifted my gaze to the rearview mirror. Now my reflection stared back, blurred, not by tears, but by something else. Not softness, not weakness. Eyes hard, clear. That's the only thing I'm not certain of. Everything else is. I hung up. For the second time that night, I made another call, this time to Linda, the one who had helped me arrange the upcoming anniversary trip to Tuscany. Linda, I need to cancel everything. Flights, villa, restaurants, all of it. I'm sorry. Cancel everything. But this is your 23rd anniversary with Mr. Sterling. Exactly. And I won't be gifting my husband a perfect vacation to take his mistress on. Linda fell silent. I didn't wait for her response. Send me the receipts. Cancel everything today. I hung up again. With every call ended, it felt like I was snapping another chain that had bound me to my old life. That was the first night after 23 years of being Robert Sterling's wife. I was no longer his Margaret. I was me armed with a plan. A reckoning was being prepared step by step, not rushed, not reckless, but precise, sharp, and beyond anyone's anticipation. Chapter 4, Memories, Papers. And the first spark I woke at 5:30 a.m., just as I had every day for the past 10 years. But this morning was different. The bed beside me was empty, not because Robert had risen earlier, but because now I knew that emptiness would be forever. No more mornings of brewing 2 cups of coffee, no more checking his emails for his travel schedule, no more reminding myself which dress would best suit the role of the CEO's wife. There was only me and what I was about to do. I stepped into the study, the room Robert had once called your little corner, though he had never entered it, unless he needed me to redraft a contract or verify a legal clause. I pulled open the drawer. Thick folders organized by year, by sector, by each stage of Sterling Enterprises' growth. I began photographing every page, every contract, every line of ink that bore my signature. The 1998 incorporation contract, where I was the first to sign as a founding investor. In 2001, when Robert needed $3 million to acquire Morrison Industries, I was the guarantor pledging my inheritance from my mother as collateral. In 2008, I mortgaged our home to ensure the company had enough to pay salaries during the financial crisis. Not a single line in the articles glorifying Robert mentioned me. Not a single photo in the company archives included me, but I had all the evidence, and now they would become weapons. At 8 a.m., David called back. The market opens in 30 minutes, Margaret. I need your final verbal confirmation to liquidate all your shares. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind surging below my feet. You have it, David. Do it. His voice grew tense. Sterling stock just dropped 2% in pre-market trading. Rumors are spreading fast. This is going to be huge. Are you absolutely sure? I opened my eyes. I've never been more sure. I hung up, then opened my laptop. On the screen, the email I had drafted at 3 a.m. waited. Subject line: official notice of withdrawal of all shares and termination of financial obligations with Sterling Enterprises. I did not tremble. I did not hesitate. I pressed send. 1 second, 2 seconds, then silence. But I knew. On the other end, a domino chain had already begun to fall. Chapter 5. The Bell of the Awakened. I thought I would feel afraid. Thought I would break down in tears. Thought I would call Robert back, apologize for a reckless impulse. But no. The only thing I felt was silence. A sweet, pure silence, as if I had just closed the door of a burning house and stepped outside, safe. Then the phone rang. Robert, his name flashing. 5 missed calls, then 8, then 15. By the 20th, I powered it off. A part of me wanted to see his face when he read the email I sent to the board, when he received notice that the accounts were frozen, when he discovered the credit cards no longer worked. I didn't need to scream. I only needed to be silent at the right moment. What I felt then was no longer pain. It was cleanliness, as though someone had just cut away a silent tumor that had been growing in my chest for 23 years. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, no milk, no sugar, exactly the way I liked it. Not the way Robert always chose for me. I stepped into the study, continuing to organize the files. Every document, every memo, the times he insisted I sign for convenience, the loans I quietly guaranteed, the insurances, the share purchases I signed in his place, because you're the one I trust most. And then the phone rang again. This time, not Robert, a strange number. I hesitated, then picked up. Mrs. Margaret, it's Vanessa. I froze. 1 beat, 2 beats. I don't think we have anything left to say to each other. You misunderstood. I just want to ask for a private conversation, maybe about what happened last night. Her voice trembled. Gone was the arrogance in the red dress. Gone was the heavy perfume and the contemptuous stare. I cut her off. There's no misunderstanding, Vanessa. And it's Miss Hartford now. Silence. I hung up before she could speak another word. I was reclaiming my first name, the name I had before Robert, before I became someone's wife, before I disappeared in his shadow. The phone kept vibrating. Robert again. Messages flooding in. What are you doing? Can we talk? You're destroying everything I read each one, and deleted them all because he no longer had the right to an answer. Chapter 6. The day I took the seat at the head of the table, I arrived 30 minutes early. The main boardroom of Sterling Enterprises was the same as ever, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city, the long, walnut conference table. A place designed to make people feel small, intimidated. But this morning, I was no longer the timid woman trailing behind her husband at the big meetings. This morning, I was the one sitting at the head of the table. I laid my documents out before me, the incorporation contract, bearing my name beside Robert's. Loan papers I had guaranteed. Investment records, detailed statements of every transfer from my personal accounts into the company. The client list I had once built. Everything was ready. The board members began filing in one by one, their faces tight, as though they were walking into a funeral. They didn't know how to look at me. Until now, I had always been Robert's wife, smiling faintly, sitting quietly at the far end, never speaking. Now I wore no wedding ring, and I had no need for polite smiles. Then the door swung open. Robert entered. I almost didn't recognize him. Hair disheveled, shirt, wrinkled tie askew. No longer the man striding down the red carpet just nights ago, but a man staggering at the edge of a cliff. Behind him, Vanessa. She wore a deep crimson suit, makeup carefully applied, trying to mask her panic. But her eyes betrayed her. She knew. She knew well. This was no longer her territory. Robert roared, "What the hell are you doing, Margaret?" "Do you know how much the stock has dropped this morning?" I remained seated, voice calm. "Good morning, Robert. I believe you know why we're meeting today." "Don't use that lawyer tone with me. You're destroying everything we built for 23 years. I nodded. "Yes." "And precisely who is we, Robert?" He froze. I pulled the first file, the incorporation documents. You signed the left side, I signed the right. I am co-founder. You never once acknowledged that. Then the second file, the $3 million loan in 2001. I was the guarantor. I put up the deed to the house my parents left me, signed with my own hand. I continued each piece of evidence laid down like nails into a coffin. The boardroom was silent, only the faint hum of the air conditioning. Vanessa now sat curled against the wall. Robert began, stammering eyes darting around for help, but no one dared meet his gaze. Patricia from legal finally spoke. "Margaret, what exactly are you saying?" I lifted my head, meeting all their eyes. "I'm not proposing anything. I'm announcing I have officially withdrawn all my capital. The company will have to restructure if it doesn't want to declare bankruptcy." You're demanding a split of the company," Robert hissed. "No. I'm reclaiming what I helped build. And you, Robert, denied that long ago." I rose, my eyes cutting toward Vanessa. "Oh, and if this company hopes to recover its image, perhaps it should reconsider the position of the lady in red. Scandal and cowardice cannot lead anything." Her face drained of color. Robert collapsed into his chair, humiliated, defeated. "I'll resign," he muttered. "I have no other choice." I looked around. Those who had once seen me as a shadow were silent, none daring to object. "Congratulations. At last you've done one thing right. I gathered my files. As I stepped out of that boardroom, I felt as though I had placed the final period at the end of one life chapter, while opening another entirely new. No longer the wife of Robert Sterling, I was Margaret Hartford, the woman behind the rise of an empire, and the very one who brought it crashing down. Chapter 7, the day I chose myself. I left the company carrying nothing but freedom. Not possessions, not shares, not the scrutinizing eyes or the whispers behind my back. Just me, a handbag, and a self-cleansed of 23 years of being someone else's shadow. I stepped into the house that had once been ours, but today it was mine. I took the wedding photo down from its grand wooden frame in the hallway. The glass shattered, but I felt no regret. Those shards were nothing compared to what I had already lost through the years. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out another folder, not divorce papers, not company records, but my old dream, a business plan I had written 10 years ago for a sustainable fashion startup. Robert had laughed at it, saying clothes won't feed anyone. But today I called the two young women who had started that project. I want to invest. No need for long pitches. All I need is for you to believe you're good enough. They were silent for a few seconds, then burst into tears. I understood that feeling when someone finally sees your potential, not because of connections, but because of faith. I began learning photography again. The passion I once adored abandoned when I chose to become the agreeable wife. The class was small, only a handful of students, but the light in the studio, it made me feel alive again. My instructor was Elena, a photographer who had worked with National Geographic. She didn't say much, but when she saw the first photo I took, she nodded. You see what others overlook. You see the story. I didn't even realize when I smiled. Perhaps for the first time in months, that smile was mine, belonging to no one else, owed to no image I had to maintain. One afternoon, my sister Sarah came by. As always, she brought cookies. Robert texted me, she said, her eyes searching mine. He said, you refused to meet him. Won't answer anything. Are you really all right? I scooped ice cream, handed her a spoon, and laughed. Do you remember the last time we talked about something that wasn't Robert? She fell silent. I went on. I used to live around him, and you got used to seeing me as just a piece of that life. But I'm not there anymore. I'm learning to live for myself. She lowered her head. No argument. You know what she whispered. I envy you, because you dared to let go. I squeezed her hand. No bitterness, no blame, just tenderness. 3 months later, I signed the official investment contract for that fashion company, and my very first photography exhibition was invited to show in a small gallery. It wasn't grand, no press. But as I stood before the photo of a woman smiling through tears, me in a nightgown the night after Robert was cast out of the board, I knew I had returned to myself, not someone's wife, not a title, no longer needing anyone to validate my worth. I was Margaret Hartford, a woman risen from the ashes she once fell into, and I was blooming once more. Chapter 8, the wordless reunion. I never planned to see him again. I never pictured a day we would meet in a crowd, me radiant, successful, and him fallen. No, I didn't need that. I didn't do everything I did for revenge. I did it to survive. And then one day I was standing at the entrance of the gallery, where my very first collection of photographs hung on those pure white walls, where the lights illuminated the faces of women once shattered, and I saw him. Robert, standing still on the far side of the room like an uninvited ghost. He wasn't wearing a suit. Gone was the confident figure striding into boardrooms. He looked smaller. His eyes found mine, and strangely, I did not tremble. I did not turn away. I only smiled, light like a breeze brushing past a shoulder. He walked closer. Margaret. He said my name as though it were the first time he had ever spoken it fully. Not darling, not my wife, not Margie, but Margaret. You look Happy, I nodded. I truly am. He fell silent. His eyes lingered on the photos on the wall. The portrait of a 60-year-old woman with tears still wet. A single mother with distant eyes. A young girl newly shaven-headed after escaping an abusive marriage. You took these? He asked. Yes. I captured those who learned how to rise again. He swallowed. I heard you invested in a fashion company. Not just one. I'm building my own fund. I didn't add that the fund was being hailed by financial magazines as a fresh breath of post-divorce feminist investment. I didn't need to. I didn't need him to know or acknowledge. He exhaled, looking down at his hands bare now, without the wedding ring. I've lost everything, haven't I? I looked straight into his eyes. No, Robert, you sold it cheap. I was simply the one who refused to buy it back. We stood in silence for a long moment. Around us, voices buzzed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Finally, he nodded. I'm sorry, I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to forgive, but because I didn't need that apology in order to move forward. I had already forgiven myself for staying silent too long, for waiting to be seen, for trading myself away to preserve something that no longer held love. I turned and walked away. No backward glance, no sadness to carry with me. Only one vow echoing in my mind, silent yet unbreakable. I had returned. Barry Chapter 9. Margaret Hartford, the woman who rewrote her story 1 year. Since the night I was thrown out of that party. 1 year since the moment I stood outside the hotel lobby, shattered inside my hands. Trembling, my heart strangled by a single command. Security removed this woman. 1 year not long, but long enough for a rebirth. This morning, I woke up in my small penthouse apartment, not as lavish as the old mansion, but every brick, every book, every cup of coffee bore my imprint. I had breakfast with classical music, the symphony I loved, the one Robert once hated, because it was too noisy for mornings. I wore a simple white shirt, jeans, and carried my camera, heading to the art gallery, where my photographs were now on national display, under the theme, Reclaim Women Who Rewrote Their Destinies. I had interviewed, photographed, and listened to dozens of women. Each one had once stood at the edge of an abyss: divorce, loss, betrayal, illness. But none of them fell. I did not tell their stories for them. I let them speak while I captured them in light and frame. I also released my first photo book, Resilience, portraits of women reclaimed, already acquired, for international publication by 2 major houses. My investment fund, Hartford Ventures, now supports 3 women-led businesses. I don't just provide capital, I provide belief, because I know what it feels like to be dismissed, to watch a brilliant idea crushed beneath skeptical eyes. I have become the woman I always needed when I was younger, a woman unafraid of her own power. That evening, I stood alone before the photograph, sold for the highest price, at the exhibition, a portrait of an old woman smiling through blurred tears, clutching a worn wedding ring. It was me. No ball gown, no makeup to hide my feelings, only the truth. I set my wine glass down, stepped out onto the balcony. Below me, the city surged, headlights shimmering like stars, a vast world waiting. My phone buzzed, a message from Vanessa. Saw the article about your exhibition. Congratulations. You deserve it. I looked at the words, then deleted them. Not out of anger, not out of spite, simply because that chapter had closed. I am Margaret Hartford. I am no longer someone's wife. I am no longer the shadow behind a man's success. I am myself a woman, once buried beneath silence, who chose to dig herself out with her own hands. Now I am not just surviving. I am radiant. If this journey inspires you, share it so more women may know. They deserve freedom, respect, and a life of their own. And if you have ever been the silent woman at the party, do not fear. You will find your voice again. And one day when you speak, the world will listen. I once thought that losing him meant losing everything. But it turned out the moment I let go was the moment I gained it all. 1 year later, I am no longer the shadow behind someone else. I am the light in my own story. If you've ever been hurt, cast aside, or told you're not enough, remember this: no one has the right to define your worth except you. And if this story resonates with you, hit like, subscribe, and share it so together we can spread the strength of women who dare to rise. I am Margaret Hartford, and this is the first chapter of a new life I am writing with my own hands. See you in the next stories, where women don't just survive, they shine.